Steve Bannon is with us now. Stephen K. Bannon, War Room Pandemic, hottest show in America, 10 to noon, 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday, is also on the dish, 216 live, 10 to noon, and rebroadcast 10 to midnight on Newsmax. So go to your favorite Newsmax channel, whatever it is, the dish. They're on everything.
They're on everything. They're everywhere.
Bannon's their 10
Get those
to midnight.
rabbit ears on the top of your
TV. He's got video,
TV.
he's got audio, he's got all the podcast thing, but he's live on the John Fredericks Show, 10 to noon, Monday through Saturday. And he's with us now. Steve, you're here with John Fredericks and Curtis Ellis. Great to have you.
First off, it's bad enough that Antifa is running around the great cities of America, but to know that John Fredericks, Curtis Ellis, and Curtis Silva are be all together at one time. The authorities should be notified.
This is the axis of something.
It's the axis
this
of
Open America
righteousness.
This Open America tour has gotten a little out of control when now you're in the heart of the beast.
This is the Justice League, Stephen. This is Justice League. We're ready. We had to put the three of us together to take on the problems facing the world.
All right, Steve, we got a lot to talk to you about today, and I know we're looking forward to your show coming up 10 a.m. sharp. But our first question is, what should Trump do right now?
Well, I think you got to take action. Look, I said on Maria Bartiromo yesterday, we have a choice. And look, this is what Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro have been preaching for decades, really. We have a choice in front of us, right? This is a fourth turning. And remember, all these turnings depend on human action and human agency. So we have a choice in front of us as individuals and as a country. We can either be the country that was personified down at Cape Canaveral at the Kennedy Space Center of advanced manufacturing, advanced technology, leading the fourth industrial revolution, like the great space launch took place. Or we can be a nation that is riven by class and racial strife. And you got a choice. It's going to be one or the other. And the key to this is people say law and order. It's law and order to a purpose, and that purpose is predicated upon a economic structure that has basically a manufacturing base. We need to become what we were in the 19th century, in the mid-20th century, a manufacturing superpower. And Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro have been preaching this, the reason Donald Trump's president of the United States. This is unrestricted warfare by the CCP. These Antifa guys, look, the protesters and the protesters about Mr. Floyd are absolutely legitimate. They have a constitutional right to do it. By and large, I think most of the protesters have been well behaved and pressing their cases. America has a tradition of protest. That's totally legitimate. What's not legitimate is these agitators that lead to the looting, that lead to the arson, that lead to the anarchy. And these agitators are quite well coordinated and they're well trained. This is just not some spontaneous thing that just kind of popped up. You can talk to any law enforcement officers, you can talk to anybody. These are well trained, well disciplined, essentially professional anarchists. I did a film on this with Andrew Breitbart and Brandon Darby back almost 10 years ago called Occupy Unmasked, which was, I knew nothing about the Occupy movement. I was all brought into this by guys like Darby and Andrew to show the professional nature, not at the surface, but underneath it. Professional, well-trained agitators, very well-trained. And these individuals are very, very well-trained and coordinated. And we've got to get to the bottom of that. And don't think the CCP is not putting money into social media and trying to instigate and try to stir this up. They've just announced today that they may have welched on agricultural purchases. There's a whole big controversy. You've seen this, Curtis, this morning about the phase one of the trade deal, which I think the trade deal is off the table.
Yeah, it's done.
The CCP and their state organs are nonstop heckling the United States about this, while they do a crackdown on legitimate protests in Hong Kong. The country's at a crossroads. And for President Trump, I don't think it's about addressing the nation. I don't think this is about talk, and it's certainly not about Twitter. I think it's about action, action, action.
What should he do?
You have to take action, right? The reason the Democrats, remember, people talk about Nixon and doing the Nixon. The reason the Democrats, look, I come from a Democratic family. The last Democrat they basically voted for was Hubert Humphrey in '68 because of the whole Kennedy legacy and working class Democrats. And after that, and man, Nixon In my family, back in the 60s, you would spit on the floor if you said the name Nixon, given that he had run against John Kennedy, right? But they voted for Nixon in 72, right? And the reason was that the Democrats were feckless about how they handled those horrible riots in 1968. And just to put it in perspective, the 1968 riots were, I think, 10 orders of magnitude worse than we're seeing today.
Absolutely. Entire neighborhoods burnt.
Oh, Newark, New Jersey, Detroit, Chicago, Washington, D.C.
Asbury Park.
Actually, I'm saying that
Asbury Park.
1968, we almost lost control of the country.
Right.
Vietnam, the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King, the assassinations of Robert Kennedy. It looked like the country was really out of control.
It took decades for some of these cities to recover.
Yeah, this
literally.
Get back in the box, but we got to focus on exactly what we want to be as a country.
So get to the specifics, Stephen.
That's about nationalism.
Steve Bannon,
it's about CCP.
So what specifically should Trump do? You say we don't need talk, we need action. What if you were advising him now on action? What would it be?
I think there's a number of things to do. Number one, I think it's on Antifa. Is a designated terrorist organization. People say it's domestic. That's just not true. Antifa is stronger in Europe than it is here. Anybody saying Antifa is just a domestic organization does not read. And if they're in the news business or government, they're lying. Antifa is stronger in London and stronger in Europe than it is here. Antifa is very strong in Europe. It's an international. This is an international organization, and we got to get to the bottom of who's funding it, who's coordinating it. These people in Antifa are not amateurs; they are professionals. This is a very highly coordinated effort, and I think this is ruining the memory of Mr. Floyd and the protest, the legitimate protest against that. And people should understand that, like the police force in Minneapolis, basically a Democratic-run city, the mayor's from William and Mary, right? A William and Mary graduate, completely feckless. A horribly trained police force that gave up the precinct the other day. And remember, if you look at that precinct, around the precinct is all minority-owned businesses. So I think the president ought to declare a lot of these disaster zones and back up the minority entrepreneurs that had their businesses burned out, right, to get these things back on their feet. I think they ought to have an immediate commission by the Attorney General and the Vice President with representatives of the African American community to get into a presidential commission and have a interim report on July 4th and a final report on August 4th about exactly what's going on with the training of the police and what's going on with these problems with the police departments. And also at the same time drop the hammer on Antifa. It's unacceptable that on Sunday night that you're burning St. John's Church across from Lafayette Park, that you're burning the Hay Adams Hotel, that they're defacing the Washington Monument, they're defacing the World War II Monument. Maybe you could justify that on Friday and say, hey, they were caught a little off guard, although that's the fourth night of it. But it's not acceptable to be on Sunday night. And the president's got to step up here and I think start taking action. People don't need to see I totally disagree with a address from the Oval Office. I think people need to see action, action, action. Action in the memory of Mr. Floyd, and also action about Antifa, and also action about the CCP and what we're doing, what Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro and Lou Dobbs and people have been preaching forever. What are we doing to bring these jobs back? If you had these advanced manufacturing jobs that had a manufacturing base, these millennials wouldn't be on the street. They wouldn't have time. Remember the old saying in Atlanta, it was a city too busy to hate, right? Well, if we brought the manufacturing base back to this country and young people had jobs they could support a family on, you wouldn't see these rootless young men wandering around on the city streets wanting to be destructive. We've got to get them a stake in this society, and a stake in the society is a good-paying job. That's a good-paying career. And if we don't do this, the country has a choice, a very stark choice. We're either going to be the country that sent that rocket into space, that type of capitalism, or we're going to devolve into class and racial strife because of a declining economy. This week they're going to announce we got the highest unemployment since the Great Depression. Where's the jobs program? Where's the jobs task force? Jobs, jobs, jobs. I don't need to talk about the stock market anymore.
Well, how do we get the jobs back if we can't open these states, Steve? I mean, I'm in Virginia. I can't even get our governor to allow my son's high school baseball team to have a practice. How the hell are you going to get jobs back?
Well, look at the governors that are slow walking the open will get political pressure from the constituents. Remember, the President of the United States made a decision to devolve this back to the governors. That was the decision that was made.
Was it a bad decision?
Once you, well, I'm not saying that. Once you devolve it back, I actually like the fact that you have the governors involved if you're going to do it, if you set guidelines. Now, the CDC guidelines that came out the other day, this is the CDC, the president's CDC. The head of CDC reports to him. Please read those guidelines that came out the other day. They essentially said no mass transportation, right? I don't know how you're going to open up New York City if you're not going to use the subway.
I mean, it's
and
insane.
My point is this came from his government. So it's got to be, people have to be on point. It's time to stop the happy talk. It's time, action, action, action. That's what people want to see. Want to see action on the economy, want to see action on jobs, want to see action on stopping these anarchists from burning our cities, want to see action so that we don't have a repeat of what happened to Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis. Action, action, action. If you show that you're going to have action, things are going to work out. If you don't, they're going to try something else. It's very simple. To me, it's plain as can be. This is not complicated. But you have to take action. I think the time for talk is over. People don't need to hear words that I'm trying to heal the nation, I'm bringing the nation together. Bring the nation together through action. President Trump is a man of action. Curtis knows this in the campaign. John, you know it. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not a lawyer. He's not a legislator. He comes to this as an entrepreneur. It's time to rejuvenate the entrepreneurial spirit in this country as personified by Elon Musk, the SpaceX team that did such a magnificent job on Saturday and has continued to do such a magnificent job throughout this entire mission. We're either going to be that country or we're going to be the country that you see last night in Washington, D.C. and these other cities.
What do you think of this mayor of Washington, D.C.? I mean, there's no tourism. It's under lockdown. She won't let you go outside without a mask. We've gone through this. I mean, I've basically abandoned the city, Steve. I can't remember the last time I was there. I was about 3 weeks ago, and I went in to buy a carton of eggs, and I couldn't get in without a mask. I had to go home and put on a scarf. So I just figured I'm not going there. So, I mean, she shuts the city down, but then you got all these protesters and rioters and looters there, and she doesn't do anything about it. I mean, how can you take her seriously, Steve?
Well, listen, I don't know, but I'm not worried about that because most of the stuff is on federal property. Lafayette Park is federal property. You can get people there. There's no reason that
the Hay Adams isn't.
Do what?
The Hay Adams isn't on federal property. And where were the police in protecting the Hay Adams?
No, hang on. You push the protesters to the north side of Lafayette Park. You can push them down the street. You can continue to push them down the street, absolutely, and get more coordinated. The World War II monuments, federal property. The Lincoln Memorial's federal property. This is a failure. This is a failure at that level. So, yes, all these Democratic mayors, yes, you can go all day long till you're blue in the face. De Blasio, disaster. Mayor of Washington, disaster. The mayor of Washington, D.C., a disaster. The mayor of Minneapolis, a William and Mary graduate, I might add, another disaster, right? They're all disasters. But we can sit all day and talk about that, or we can talk about the actions we can take. I got to tell you, that there's got to be an effort by at the federal level, I think, in Washington, D.C. tonight, to make sure, the aerial photograph, I think, by the local TV helicopter at 11:45 at night was Washington. Was about 50 fires around different parts of the town. Started by small groups. This was not mass demonstration. There were not tens of thousands of people out there.
No, this is absolutely organized. And you raise so many good points. Antifa is an international organization. They're stronger in Europe than here. The money's being funneled to them from God knows where, and I have a feeling Attorney General Barr is going to get to the bottom of that. The source of all of our problems is the tattered economy, and that is a direct result of China's economic warfare against us. When the left natters on about income inequality, the reason we have income inequality is because all the good-paying jobs that were primarily held by black and Hispanic and lower-income people have departed, have gone to China. And so you're right to bring all of this together. It's absolutely essential that we not lose sight of that.
If we executed John Fredericks and the John Fredericks Radio Network, which are one of the most powerful and important in the world, you've changed world history. because the CCP's made me public enemy number one because of this access to the deplorables. If we executed on what Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro preached, this country would have an economic renaissance. And it's time now to raise the stakes. Because if we don't execute on that, if we don't bring back this manufacturing economy, you can see as we try to reopen this on these service jobs, you're not going to get the lift. And we're never going to be the nation we were as an industrial superpower with the supply chains back here and the universities' R&D departments feeding into manufacturing that have high value-added jobs that a young man can have a family with and have a career with, right? I came out of a blue-collar family, had 5 kids, all went to Catholic school, a mother who was a housewife with a guy that had a union job at the phone company, right? And people say, oh, you're nostalgic. I'm not nostalgic. I'm a realist. You can get back to that. The nostalgia people are the people who don't want to take the effort, the Wall Street crowd and the global corporatists that want the slave labor in China that's made serfs of American workers. This is what I keep preaching. The millennials are nothing more than Russian serfs. You don't own anything. They're not going to own anything. If they don't own anything, if they don't have any stake in this, this is what you're going to get. This is law and order to a purpose. The law and order's got to be to an economic order that is based upon workers. It's like I said yesterday, Maria, American capital for American jobs through American companies. If we preach that and all you have to do is execute. This doesn't have to be complicated. You execute on what Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro have been preaching, and Lou Dobbs, and picked up and personified by President Trump in 2014, 15, and 16, right? That the reason he's president of the United States was a rejection of the managed decline of the United States of America by its elites. What you're seeing today is that decline, okay? So we got 2 choices. You're either going to have Cape Canaveral or you're going to have Minneapolis, right? You pick them, right? I know this. I'm going to go down. I'm going to leave it all on the field for Plan A, okay?
Yeah.
That's and here's the thing. We know we can win on that. We know we can win for the country. This is beyond politics. We can win for the country in this, but it's got to be action. The time for talk. The president went in the Rose Garden the other day. The first president really to stand up to the Chinese. However, as I said on Maria, those are measured responses. The time for measured responses to the CCP is over. Right. We don't need the Secretary of Treasury to study. We don't need any more reports. We know exactly. It's like the movie The Untouchables when Sean Connery turns to, Elliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner, and says, everybody knows where the whiskey is. It's in Prohibition. Everybody knows where the stills are. They know where the whiskey. Do you have the political will to go across the street with an axe and beat down the door? The question is, we know what all the issues are. We know what all the problems are. And we know what the solutions are. Do we have the political will to beat down the door? And that we don't need the Secretary of Treasury studies. We don't need reports. We need to choke off the Chinese Communist Party from any access to capital in the United States of America, and that capital has got to be put to the use of entrepreneurs in this country. So we do that, we're going to have a manufacturing renaissance.
You agree with me that although the president's statement on China and Hong Kong in the Rose Garden was acceptable, I didn't think it went far enough. I thought you used the perfect words. It was very measured and very conservative in what he was saying, and I think you're right. I think he's got to lay it out there, and this has got to be the end of this.
Directionally, the president's absolutely correct. You can tell that the Wall Street faction around the president watered it down.
Yeah, they did water it down.
Donald Trump is the hammer. American capital and American technology is the anvil. Okay? We have a simple solution. The CCP will get no access to American capital and will get no access to American technology. We will choke them down like we have the option to. Remember, for your listening audience, that capital, when I say American capital, it's your money. It's the pension fund money. It's the insurance company money. It's the savings account. It's your money. Your hard-earned money is what has gone to finance all the manufacturing jobs leaving the United States of America and going to China, okay? And if we stop that, and we don't need the Secretary of Treasury to study it, we need to stop it. So the measured response of the administration, at least it's a response. Joe Biden and the globalist Democrats have kowtowed to the CCP for decades, and also the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street faction of the Republican Party. It's time to stop that. That gives you the future of what you saw in Cape Canaveral. What gives you the future of Minneapolis and Washington, D.C. last night and these other cities is continue to let them be a manufacturing superpower and let us be a tributary state.
On the issue of law and order, Andrew McCarthy has a great piece up on National Review right now, and he's saying under Article 4 of the Constitution, the president has the power to basically call in the National Guard or use the military to restore order in these cities where the Democratic mayors and governors are playing footsie and just sleeping.
So
the question is, should he exercise that, Steve, in the name of action?
I think right now, I think what he ought to do, at least as an interim step, he devolved these powers in the pandemic to the governors and to the mayors because of federalism. Okay, I don't know right now why this is any different. I would definitely directly coordinate with them, and if they're not prepared to basically put in civil order, and part of the order should be the issues about the social distancing. If it's I'm not trying to be funny on that. It's a pandemic, then treat it like a pandemic. This is why when we're going to shut the country down,
Steve, it's hard to make that argument when there's thousands of people shoulder to shoulder in all these cities, and so the whole thing is turned into a complete joke. I guess they're all going to die. I mean, I guess all these people in these riots and looting and I guess based on what we're told, they're all going to die, right?
This is the hypocrisy of these Democratic governors and mayors.
Exactly.
They're allowing those people to potentially become more infected. So this is why he's all that power. I think it'll be direct coordination with these governors, and if they're not prepared to act, and I think you put them on notice of what you say is the results of the action, like no more looting and no more burning. You can have the protest, but you put curfews in. You can have the protest up to a certain time, but no more looting, no more burning, and should be rounding these guys up in mass. They should be checking their driver's license. If they cross interstate lines, that's a federal felony already, inciting a riot. And I think they ought to be held without bail.
Steve, you remember the Chicago 7?
Yeah.
The conspiracy to commit riot, to incite violence, crossing state lines.
They all went to jail, and that was before we had mobile phones.
I would get Barr out to he ought to do two things. The Attorney General ought to be all over the issue of what happened to Mr. Floyd and how did you have the breakdown in police training and policing and all that. That's a huge issue. It's got to be addressed. The Justice Department should get more involved in that. But they also, at the same time, should be flooding the zone with U.S. attorneys from Washington, DOJ guys to support the local U.S. attorneys to start rounding up these Antifa guys.
Should he declare martial law in Washington, D.C.?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. No way. Absolutely not. You don't need to declare martial law. You need to enforce the law.
Right.
Enforce the law first. You don't need to declare martial law. We're not in a situation we need martial law. You just can't let this thing metastasize.
Let's see what happens.
You can't push them to the north side of Lafayette Park and then allow them to sit across the street and burn the St. John's Church in the Hay Adams.
Exactly. I mean, it's just disgusting what is happening.
That's operational with the federal. You had National Guard, you had D.C. Police, you had Secret Service,
and nobody could stop it.
To me, that's you tell them, hey, here's what I want, and just execute on it. And if the guys don't execute on it, start firing some people.
And then you got to put these people in jail.
If the President of the United States, if it turns out, and they're saying fake news, if he was taken to the bunker on Friday night, the head of the Secret Service, and I think the head of DHS ought to be fired. If we were in a situation, the President of the United States had to go down to the bunker, which I believe would be the only time in American history a president went to the bunker. Dick Cheney, when he was vice president, when they were under direct attack and thought the White House had an incoming, 737, right, headed right at it. The vice president went to the bunker. I don't believe a president has ever been to the bunker. If the president was taken to the bunker by the Secret Service and DHS, I think that's somebody dropped the ball. You should not have been that unorganized. Not on night 4 of this. It's not acceptable. Right. Somebody should be fired. They got to start holding people accountable that are around you. Start holding your own team accountable. I want action. This is the action I want. If we're not going to get it, I'm going to get somebody in here that can get it done.
Can we win in November, Steve?
It's not. Today's November 3rd. Win today. This whole thing about do not worry about November 3rd. It's not relevant. It doesn't exist. Every day is November 3rd. Win the day, and you'll win November 3rd. Show the country you can take action and pull the country. This is about the United States of America. This is beyond politics. This is an inflection point for this country, right? This is beyond politics. And and anybody that rises above it and shows action, the nation will understand that. The country will understand that. This is not about you play politics in this. You worry about the politics of the polling of it, you'll get defeated, and you should be defeated. This is about the country. We're at a very serious inflection point here, and it's got to be about action, action, action. The time for talk is over. Time for action.
All right, Steve Bannon, I know you have to roll. I want you to thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
This week I got to do.
I got to tell you, thanks. The show has given the show on a global basis is massive. I can't tell you the feedback I've gotten from all over the world, and we've given a platform to people like Curtis Ellis to hear the Ellises, the Navarros, to hear these voices that you just haven't heard, and it's been tremendous and a huge impact. And here's how we know: the Chinese Communist Party has designated the show as the public enemy number one by the CCP in China, and the viewership of this when it's subtitled in Mandarin later in the day is literally hundreds of millions of people. So you've done a great service to the country. You've done a great service to mankind because we are relentless on the show to talk the truth about what's really going on. So I got to tell you, to provide the platform for Curtis and for Navarro and for all the economic nationalists and what's really happened has been a great effort.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for being with us today.